Chapter 2. Root let the memory of the argument slip away as she picked up the pace to a jog and focused on the present, on her body and how it interacted with all the life forces around her. The wetlands were alive and humming with a million different sounds. After Root was born, Casa moved away from the suburban dirt colony where she had been visited by John Harper and Ucham for the first time. When they eventually began sort of dating, she received a cryptic message from Harper. For undisclosed reasons, he recommended Casa and Root pull up stakes and transplant themselves in the small, rural enclave of Juniper Fire, Florida. Despite the blind faith that demanded of Casa, it had been the right choice for sure, economically and energetically. Ever since Root was a little girl, Casa and Harper took her on nature walks, picnics, and adventures in the seemingly endless expanse. But when Root's knowledge of the local plants and animals outstripped Casa and Harper, she had developed a sense of entitlement. As far as the eye could see, she felt that this was her private estate, her queendom, and that attitude was one of the many rifts between her and Casa, and the first reason she had started heading out alone, which was dangerous as hell. Firstly dangerous, because Florida still hadn't solved their invasive snake problem. On one of their last walks together, Root had wandered off, only to be found screaming, transfixed by a Burmese python, gorging itself on a juvenile white-tailed deer. And there were plenty of other native animals to worry about as well. Black bears, Florida panthers, coyotes, bobcats, and alligators. All began to manifest in Root's nightmares. It was time for a protector after one too many nights of dashing into Root's room because she couldn't wake up from becoming snake chow. Usually, by the time they were adults, dirt navigators would have a familiar or spiritual linked animal companion to stand guard during navigation, or, in the case of reptiles, lay guard. But, Root being Root, she had ended up with 3. Well, 4 if you counted her Sonoran desert toad, Chubbs. But he spent most of the year underground in the backyard hibernating, so embarrassing. Yeah, she didn't like talking about it. The deer incident of 7th grade, as Casa called it, along with Root hitting puberty that same year, prompted Casa and Harper to take her puppy shopping. After arriving at the local animal shelter, they let her roam from cage to cage, feeling for the potential of spiritual connectivity. When she got a little too close to a mangy, hostile St. Bernard, it bellowed at a young Root, shaking her to tears as she fell on her butt. Before Casa and John could react, a little mottled mutt puppy in the next cage baby barked in protest. By the time they had picked Root up, the tiny warrior had bloodied its paws, desperately scratching at the chain-link fence, trying to save Root from that mean old dog. Personal bodyguard, check, Casa had thought, with a wide grin and folded arms. But, as Fella grew from puppy to dog over the next few years, it turned out that Root wasn't much of a dog person. She had a good rapport with Fella, but just not the intense, magical bond Casa had hoped for. It was more like a working relationship. Good cop, slobbering cop? He was a high-strung dude. Most likely an Aussie and German Shepherd mix, which was not ideal when Root was meditating, or all the other I can't play with you right now spiritual moments. But his temperament was rock solid, and he was both loyal and brave to a point way beyond stupidity. Once, when they were lost but good, and Root was dosed on the uh-oh side of things, he ate her entire stash, just to be able to guide her back home. It had almost killed him, but how was he supposed to know she had added a raw chocolate to her mushroom nougats? A pang of guilt arose in her chest from recalling his whining pleas on the vet table. Still, she let it go and bolstered her energetic shielding with a few key visualizations. Water over your gills. Keep moving, Root told herself. letting out a cathartic, echoing hoot. Happy again, she looked down at Fella's smiling eyes and gave him his usual allotment of 2 air kisses, one just for being him, and one for not complaining about his doggy backpack, as it forever squeaked and shifted on top of him. As they hiked along, soggy grass and debris from the last storm mushed and snapped under Root's explorer boots, aka boy deterrents. At least that's what Casa had privately dubbed them. Root had just gone through another growth spurt. Suddenly, she had lady hips in a C-cup, and her mother had an ulcer. Coincidence? Eventually, she matched the rest of her wardrobe to the utilitarian, well-worn boots. Upon seeing that, Casa was more than thrilled to buy Root accessories for her rough-and-tumble decomposition fashion statement. However, Root was so sensitive to psychic fingerprints that Casa had to buy a carload of clothes at a time. Then, Root would sort the items like baby chicks, maybe keeping one thing out of a dozen. Later, Casa would have to schlep back to the thrift store with the cast-offs for credit or redonation. Those old boots had served her well. Root had just glued and patched pieces of inner tube or other scrap materials where needed. She loved them, maybe more than Moo. With that playful, projected thought, Moo, the black cat familiar riding inside her backpack, woke up and began rustling around, clicking and chattering in disapproval. She made the same sound when prowling and hunting in the hedge outside their front door. It also served double duty as one of Root's 10 tools when navigating, as sound alone could help her stay put on Earth, or blast her out of her body entirely. But this time, Moo was simply returning Root's sarcastic volleyball over the net. Yeah, I've known you longer than the boots. Still, black fur trim would be amazing, Root said, wishing Moo could see her smirk. Moo had been the first familiar that Root chose for herself. She was initially named Mustache for the shape she assumed while napping. A cartoon villain's curled and twisted handlebars. And secondly, as that kitten grew in size and intellect, she turned out to be aptly named. If that cat could have tied Fella to railroad tracks, she would have, long ago. Mustache plotted and fantasized daily about the dog's demise. Once, Root watched her mom's favorite historic cartoon vids and fell over laughing when a safe landed on the head of an unfortunate dog. When Root looked over, Moo glanced back and forth between the screen and a sleeping Fella. Thankfully, no safes in the house, Root thought, as she shoved Moo out of her diabolic wishing. And Moo, displaying a, "What? Who? Me?" look. Even the finest attorney couldn't defend. Busted. For his part, Fella usually just ignored Moo. Still, they did have a history of minor skirmishes over the years, driving Root crazy to no end. Eventually, Mustache had been shortened simply to Moo for efficient yelling and scolding. But, for better or worse, Root had links spiritually to that scheming, sly, and yes, sometimes lovable black cat, so strongly that they even took baths together. Well, Moo would stand on the edge, dipping her tail in, then wonder why it was wet, chase it in a circle, fall onto Root's stomach, and then traipse out of the bathroom, hissing, with a wet butt. Fun times. The problem with cats is, one of the problems with cats is, they are lazy as all get out, and they are seldom down for long hikes. So, Root usually kept Moo in her modified backpack whenever the 3 of them headed into the forests and swamps of their backyard. It was designed to keep her safe from all the creepy crawlies and keep them safe from her. Moo did love to kill her some shit, often bringing home half-plucked birds, crunchy reptiles, and anything else her little panther-esque self could subdue. Suddenly, Fella released a low "arf," bringing her attention to the leaf-covered trail. Oh, look, we're here, Root said, sweaty and smiling. On the side of the path, about 20 feet away, stood her secret marker, a garden gnome dressed for the beach and flipping the bird. Root did a 360 spin just to make sure she was totally alone. Then, superstitiously, touching the gnome's pointy hat, she and Fella darted off the main path. Don't let any suckers in, little guy, she said, as the bushes closed behind her, securing her private lane. From here on out, she was safe from rando nature lovers, or worse, clandestine growers. She had purposely chosen the type of terrain they had no use for. Pulling out her machete, she did a little spring cleaning, bushwhacking anything on her secret trail which was hella thorny or caused contact rashes. Root's gnome bouncer was an old-school hack, a cheat code to get around using her kid keeper watch. Casa only had a few house rules, and on the top 5 was, you can go anywhere, but just take the damn watch. However, Root only uses a smartwatch to call home or help identify flora and fauna, despite its intended purpose of assisting Casa to track Root like a damn preserve animal. But, despite Reggie and Dirt research to the contrary, Root swore the device disrupted her nav sessions. So most times, she just kept it in her pack, or stuffed it inside some RF shielding when she meditated. Sometimes Moo would chew on it out of solidarity and boredom. Mostly boredom. It was a small backpack, after all. As she and Fellow strolled through the narrow ravine, Root checked the clovers she had planted on the path last week. Yep, no crushed footprints, man or beast, which occasionally were one and the same. Soon they reached the wall of vines she had likewise planted. Tunneling her slender arms into the maze of green stalks, she found the old freezer door push release and shoved it with her palm. The camouflage door cracked open, and she squeezed past, then pushed it closed with a crisp click.